The meeting room aboard the starship Horizon's Edge felt cold despite the warm air flowing through the vents. 12 different alien species sat around a large circular table, their strange forms creating odd shadows under the bright lights. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked like walking crystals that caught the light in beautiful ways. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the front of the room, the only human among all these aliens, or his blue uniform with pride. But inside he felt nervous. This was the biggest meeting he had ever attended. The Galactic Council's Military History Conference happened only once a year, and this time they had invited Earth to send someone. Dr. Alina Rodriguez sat in the back corner, watching everything with careful eyes. She studied aliens for a living, but she had never seen so many different species in one place. Her job was to observe and learn, not to speak. General Vextar from the Zephyrian Empire leaned back in his chair. His purple skin shimmered as he moved, and his forearms crossed over his chest. He had been making rude comments about humans all morning. "I still do not understand why the Council invited Earth," Vextar said, his voice sounding like wind through metal pipes. "Humans are the weakest species in the galaxy. They have no special powers, no advanced technology, and they live for such a short time. What could they possibly teach us about war?" Several other aliens nodded their heads. Corvin Chief Thrak, who looked like a giant bear with 6 legs, made a low growling sound that meant he agreed. The crystalline ambassador Shendel, whose body was made of living blue crystal, it created soft musical tones that showed interest but doubt. Jake felt his face grow hot with anger, but he kept his voice calm. "Every species fights differently, General Vextar. Humans might not have your strength or your long lives, but we have our own ways of winning battles." "Like what?" asked Hive Queen Zoct H, the leader of the insect people. Her large compound eyes looked at Jake with curiosity. She was known for studying everything very carefully before making decisions. Jake looked around the room. All eyes were on him now. He could tell them about human weapons or tactics, but that would not really explain what made humans special in war. He needed to tell them something that would help them understand. "Let me tell you a story," Jake said, walking closer to the table. "It happened during what we call World War II, over 300 years ago on Earth." Ambassador Shendel's crystal body began to glow softly. "Stories are how humans pass down important information." "This is interesting." Jake nodded. "The story is about a man named Lieutenant Sam Carter. He is flying a small fighter aircraft over the Pacific Ocean, far from any land. His job was to protect our ships from enemy attacks." Chief Thrak leaned forward. His people understood warriors and battles. "What kind of weapon did this fighter carry?" "Not much," Jake admitted. "Just some small guns and maybe one bomb." But Sam was not alone. He had a gunner named Pete who sat behind him and operated a machine gun. Dr. Rodriguez watched the aliens' faces as Jake spoke. She could see they were trying to understand why this story mattered. Jake continued. "During the battle, enemy aircraft attacked Sam's fighter. The plane was badly damaged. One engine was on fire, and Pete was hurt badly. Blood was everywhere in the cockpit. We retreated to get medical help," said Vextar. "That is the logical choice." "No," Jake said quietly. "Sam saw something below him. A huge enemy ship was moving toward our fleet. If that ship reached our forces, it would destroy thousands of our people." The room became very quiet. Even the soft humming sounds that some aliens made when they breathed seemed to stop. "Sam's fighter was too damaged to escape," Jake explained. "The radio was broken, so he could not call for help. Pete was unconscious and bleeding. The smart thing would have been to try to land the plane on the water and hope for rescue." Hive Queen Zacht clicked her mandibles together, a sound that meant confusion. But if his aircraft was damaged, what could he do against a large warship? Jake looked directly at her. Sam pointed his fighter at the enemy ship and flew straight into it. The silence in the room was complete now. Several aliens looked at each other with expressions that showed they did not understand. "That makes no sense," Vextar said finally. "He killed himself for nothing. One small aircraft cannot sink a large ship. But it did, Jake replied. Sam's fighter hit the ship's fuel storage area. Explosion was so big that it destroyed the entire vessel and saved thousands of our people. Ambassador Shendel's glow grew brighter, which meant she was thinking hard. This human chose certain death when he might have survived by escaping. Yes, Jake said simply. Chief Thrax stood up, his massive form towering over the table. Among my people, we honor warriors who die in battle, but we expect them to take many enemies with them. This human took only one ship that would have killed thousands of his friends, Jake pointed out. Sam knew that his life was less important than all those lives. Dr. Rodriguez could see that the aliens were struggling with this idea. Most species in the galaxy fought for territory, resources, or survival. The idea of dying to save others was not common among them. There's something else, Jake added. Before Sam flew into that ship, he could have ejected from his fighter. He had a parachute. Pete was too hurt to eject safely, so he stayed to die with his wounded companion. Asked Shendel. Sam would not leave Pete behind, Jake confirmed. Humans have a saying, no one gets left behind. It means we do not abandon our friends, even if staying with them means we will die too. The alien delegates looked uncomfortable now. This was not the kind of military story they expected to hear. They had thought Jake would talk about clever tactics or powerful weapons, not about choosing to die for others. Vexstar shifted in his chair. This is just one story about one unusual human. Surely most of your species is not so... reckless.
Oh.
Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. General, that story is not unusual at all. It is exactly what any human soldier would have done in the same situation. The room fell silent again as the aliens considered what this meant. The next morning, the aliens gathered again in the meeting room. Many of them had spent the night thinking about Jake's story. Some looked worried, others seemed curious, but all of them wanted to hear more. General Vexstar arrived early and sat in the same chair as before. His purple skin looked darker today, which meant he was either angry or confused. I have been thinking about your story, human. One act of madness does not prove anything about your entire species. Jake nodded as he took his place at the front of the room. You are right, General. One story is not enough. Let me tell you about Sergeant Lisa Thompson. Dr. Elena Rodriguez noticed that more aliens had come to today's meeting. Word was spreading through the ship about the humans' strange war stories. She saw Captain Maria Santos enter the room and sit near the back. Maria was the ship's security chief, a tough woman with scars on her hands from old battles. Lisa was a combat medic, Jake began. Her job was to help wounded soldiers during a battle in a place called Stalingrad. It was winter, and the city was mostly destroyed. Buildings fell down every day from bomb attacks. Hive Queen Zoc made clicking sounds with her mouth. Medical personnel should stay away from fighting areas. That is logical. Human medics go wherever wounded people are, Jake explained. Lisa was in a building that got hit by artillery fire. The walls collapsed and she was trapped in the basement with 12 wounded soldiers. Ambassador Shendel's crystal body began to glow. How long was she trapped? 3 days, Jake said. She had very little medical supplies and no food. Building was unstable, and more pieces fell down every time bombs exploded nearby. Chief Thrax leaned forward. Did she try to escape? She could have, Jake replied. There was a small hole in the rubble that led outside. Lisa was small enough to crawl through it. But the wounded soldiers could not fit through the hole. The room was quiet, except for the soft humming of the ship's air system. Dr. Rodriguez watched the aliens' faces and saw that they were starting to understand what Jake was about to tell them. Lisa stayed. Jake continued. She used her shirt to make bandages. She gave the soldiers her water. When they cried from pain, she held their hands and sang to them. But surely she sent messages for help, said Vexstar. Her radio was broken, Jake said. No one knew where she was. The fighting above ground was too intense for rescue teams to search the rubble. Captain Santos stood up from her seat in the back. May I add something, Commander Morrison? Jake nodded. Of course, Captain. Maria walked to the front of the room. Her boots made solid sounds on the metal floor. My grandfather was at Stalingrad too, told me stories about medics like Lisa Thompson. As the aliens turned to look at Maria. She was shorter than Jake, but moved like a fighter. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, and her uniform had ribbons that showed she had been in many battles. My grandfather was Private Carlos Santos, Maria said. He was wounded in the same area where Lisa was trapped. A piece of metal cut his leg, and he was bleeding badly. "See one of the soldiers Lisa helped?" asked Shendel. "No," Maria replied. Carlos was outside the building, but he saw something that changed his life forever. Maria looked around the room at all the alien faces watching her. 3 days after the building collapsed, Carlos saw a small figure crawling out of the hole in the rubble. It was Lisa. She was covered in dust and blood, and she could barely walk. "She finally escaped," said Zokdach. "She came out to get help for the soldiers still trapped inside," Maria corrected. Lisa had not eaten for 3 days. She had given all her water to the wounded men. But she crawled through enemy fire to find more medical supplies. Jake nodded. Lisa went back into that unstable building 12 times. She brought out every wounded soldier, one by one. Some of them were enemies who had been shooting at her friends just days before. The aliens looked shocked. Chief Thrax stood up, his large form casting shadows across the table. "She helped enemy soldiers? That makes no sense. In war, you kill your enemies, not heal them." Lisa said that wounded people are not enemies, Jake explained. They are just people who need help. Dr. Rodriguez could see that this idea was very hard for the aliens to understand. Most species fought until one side was completely destroyed. The idea of helping wounded enemies was strange to them. "What happened to Lisa?" asked Shendel. "She saved all 12 soldiers," Maria answered. "But the effort was too much for her. She collapsed from exhaustion and hunger. Lisa died 2 hours after rescuing the last man." The room was completely silent now. Even the ship's background noise seemed quieter. "The strange thing," Jake added, "is that this story is not unusual. Either human medics do this kind of thing all the time. We have thousands of stories just like Lisa's. Vexter's 4 arms moved nervously. Your species regularly sacrifices healthy individuals to save wounded ones, even wounded enemies." "Save who we can," Jake said simply. "That is what humans do." Captain Santos spoke again. "My grandfather lived because Lisa's actions inspired other medics to be braver. Carlos went on to have a family, and eventually I was born. Lisa never had children of her own, but her sacrifice made my life possible. She died for people she did not even know," said Zokt quietly. "Lisa died because she could not leave. Wounded people to suffer," Jake corrected. "She did not think about herself. She only thought about helping others." Dr. Rodriguez noticed that several aliens were making soft sounds that meant they were troubled or confused. This was not how they expected intelligent beings to behave in war. "There is more," Jake said. "Lisa kept a diary while she was trapped. She wrote that the hardest part was not the hunger or the cold or the danger. The hardest part was listening to the wounded soldiers' call for their mothers." The Ambassador Shendel's glow became very bright. "Even enemy soldiers?" "Even enemy soldiers," Jake confirmed. "Lisa wrote that all soldiers from any side cry for their mothers when they are dying. She said that made them all the same." The aliens looked at each other with expressions that showed they were beginning to understand something important about humans. It was not just that humans would die for their friends. It was that humans saw everyone as worth saving, even their enemies. General Vextar was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke in a voice that was much softer than before. "These stories are disturbing, human. Your species does not behave like rational beings in war." Jake smiled sadly. "No, General, we behave like humans." On the 3rd day, the meeting room felt different. The aliens sat closer together, as if they needed comfort from their own kind. More delegates had arrived during the night. Word about the human stories was spreading through the entire ship. Jake stood at the front again, but he could see that the aliens were looking at him differently now. They no longer seemed bored or dismissive. Instead, they watched him with the careful attention that prey animals give to predators. "Today, I want to tell you about Colonel Amy Patterson, Jake began. This happened during the Mars Colony Wars about 50 years ago. Dr. Alina Rodriguez had brought her tablet to take notes. She noticed that even the ship's crew members were finding excuses to walk past the meeting room. Everyone wanted to hear these stories. General Vexter spoke first. Before you begin, human, I must ask something. Are these stories real? Or are they myths your people created to frighten enemies? They are all real, Jake replied. We keep detailed records of our wars. Every story can be verified. Hive Queen Zacte made worried clicking sounds. That makes them more disturbing. Jake nodded. Colonel Patterson was in charge of defending Settlement 7 on Mars. It was a small colony with only about 2,000 people. Most of them were families with children. How many soldiers did she have? Asked Chief Thrak. 40, Jake said simply. The aliens looked at each other. Ambassador Shendel's crystal body flickered with confused patterns of light. 40 soldiers to defend 2,000 people? Yes, Jake confirmed. The enemy force had 3,000. Trained fighters with heavy weapons and armored vehicles. The logical choice would be evacuation, said Vexter. Move the people to safety and abandon the settlement. The colony could not be evacuated, Jake explained. The only transport ships were being used for military operations elsewhere. Besides, Settlement 7 had something very important. Captain Maria Santos entered the room again, this time bringing engineer Lucy Hayes with her. Lucy was a small woman with grease stains on her uniform from working on ship engines. What was so important? Asked Seth. The colony had the only medical facility on Mars that could treat a rare disease, Jake said. Hundreds of children throughout the solar system depended on medicine made there. If the facility was destroyed, those children would die, Lucy Hayes spoke up from the back of the room. I have read the technical reports from Settlement 7. Colonel Patterson's situation was impossible. 40 soldiers cannot hold a fortified position against 3,000 attackers. But she tried anyway, Jake said. For how long? Asked Shendel. 2 weeks. The room fell silent. Dr. Rodriguez stopped taking notes and stared at Jake. Even she had not heard this story before. Chief Thrak stood up slowly. 2 weeks. That is impossible. No force that small could resist for 2 weeks against such odds. Patterson did not fight the way her enemies expected, Jake explained. On the first day, when the enemy surrounded the settlement, she did something strange. Several aliens asked at the same time. She sent a message to the enemy commander. She told him that she knew his real name, where he was born, the names of his children, and what school they attended. The aliens looked confused. Vextar tilted his head. Why would she tell him information he already knew? To show him that she had been studying his forces for months, Jake replied. She knew everything about them. Their supply lines, their family members back home, their weaknesses and fears. Lucy Hayes walked to the front of the room. Colonel Patterson was an expert in psychological warfare. She knew that the strongest weapon humans have is not guns or bombs. It is the ability to get inside an enemy's mind. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake continued, Patterson used that knowledge. She sent personal messages to individual enemy soldiers. Messages about their families, their girlfriends, their secret fears. How could she know such personal information? Asked Zacht H. Human intelligence networks are very good, Lucy explained. We study our enemies like scientists study insects. We learn everything about them. Jake nodded. Patterson told one enemy officer that his wife was having an affair while he was away fighting. She told another that his sick father had died, but his family had not told him yet. The aliens were looking more and more uncomfortable. Dr. Rodriguez realized that they were beginning to understand how dangerous human psychological warfare could be. Some of the information was true, some was lies, Jake admitted, but the enemies could not tell which was which. They started to worry, to doubt, to wonder what else Patterson knew about them. Did this actually help her defense? Asked Shendel. The 4th day, 50 enemy soldiers deserted and went home, Jake said. On the 7th day, 2 enemy officers shot each other in an argument about Patterson's messages. By the 10th day, The enemy commander was so paranoid that he executed 3 of his own men for imaginary betrayal. Chief Thrax sat down heavily. She turned them against each other. Humans are very good at finding the cracks in enemy morale and making them bigger, Lucy added. Colonel Patterson knew that an army that does not trust itself cannot fight effectively. But surely the enemy still had overwhelming numbers, said Vexstar. Yes, Jake agreed. So Patterson used her other advantage. She knew the settlement better than the attackers did. Jake walked around the table as he spoke. Settlement 7 was built in an old mining complex. There were tunnels everywhere under the ground. Patterson had spent months preparing those tunnels. Preparing them how? Asked Zek nervously. Traps, Jake said simply. Explosive traps. Poison gas traps. Traps that would collapse tunnels on anyone who entered them. The settlement above ground was just bait. Dr. Rodriguez felt a chill run down her spine. She was beginning to understand why the other humans on the ship had such respect for their military commanders. Patterson let the enemy take the surface. Buildings, Jake continued. Then she and her 40 soldiers disappeared into the tunnels. For 8 days, they turned the underground into a nightmare. What kind of nightmare? Jindal asked, though her voice suggested she did not really want to know. The enemy soldiers would enter a tunnel and never come out, Jake explained. Or they would come out screaming about invisible attackers. Some came out with messages carved into their skin, telling other soldiers what would happen to them if they kept fighting. The aliens were making distressed sounds now. Several of them were backing away from Jake as if he might be dangerous. When rescue ships finally arrived, Jake concluded, they found Patterson and 12 of her soldiers still fighting from the deepest tunnels. The enemy force had given up and retreated 3 days earlier. 12 survivors out of 40? Asked Thrak quietly. 12 survivors who saved 2,000 civilians and kept the medical facility running, Jake corrected. The children who needed that medicine are still alive today. General Vexstar was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was very small. Your species fights wars inside the enemy's mind as well as on the battlefield. Jake nodded. We fight with everything we have, General. Everything. On the 4th and final day, the meeting room was packed. Aliens from every part of the ship had come to hear the end of Jake's stories. Some stood along the walls because there were not enough chairs. The air felt thick with tension and fear. Jake looked different today. Stood straighter, and his eyes were harder. Dr. Alina Rodriguez realized that he was no longer just telling stories. He was delivering a warning. Today I will tell you about General Patricia Stone, Jake began. Happened during the Tau Ceti crisis, just 15 years ago. The aliens were completely silent. Even General Vexstar, who had argued so much on the first day, sat quietly with his forearms folded. General Stone was in charge of defending the human colony at Tau Ceti when the hegemony invaded. Jake continued. The hegemony brought 500 warships. Humans had only 10. Hive Queen Zack made quiet clicking sounds. Those odds are impossible. Yes, Jake agreed. The hegemony commander sent a message to General Stone. He said that if humans surrendered immediately, he would allow the colonists to become slaves instead of killing them all. Ambassador Shendal's crystal body flickered with nervous light. Slavery is better than death. That was a reasonable offer. Jake looked directly at her. General Stone sent back a 2-word message. Come try. Captain Maria Santos and Engineer Lucy Hayes entered the room together. Behind them came Commander Pete Williams, the highest-ranking officer on the ship. His presence made all the aliens even more nervous. The battle lasted 6 hours, Jake said. All 10 human ships were destroyed. General Stone's flagship was the last to fall. So the humans lost, said Chief Thrak, sounding almost relieved. The humans lost the battle, Jake corrected. But they won the war. The aliens looked confused. Commander Williams stepped forward. He was an older man with gray hair and scars on his face from old fights. May I explain what General Stone did? Williams asked. Jake nodded and stepped aside. Williams walked to the center of the room, and every alien's eyes followed him. When General Stone realized she could not win the space battle, Williams said. She activated something we call the Scorched Galaxy Protocol. What is that? Asked Vexstar nervously. If humanity's going to die, Williams explained, we make sure our enemies regret killing us. Dr. Rodriguez felt her hands begin to shake. She had heard rumors about the Scorched Galaxy Protocol, but she had never learned the details. General Stone had spent months preparing for this moment, Williams continued. She had placed nuclear bombs in every major facility on the planet. Factories, power plants, water treatment centers, spaceports, but those facilities were valuable, said Zax. Why destroy useful infrastructure? Because dead humans cannot use infrastructure, Jake replied. And neither can our enemies. Williams nodded. General Stone also poisoned the water supplies and released biological weapons that would make the soil unable to grow food for 100 years. Now the aliens were making distress sounds now. Several of them stood up as if they wanted to leave the room. That is not all, Williams added. Stone had hidden nuclear weapons in the planet's crust. When she activated them, they caused massive earthquakes that split the continent in half. She destroyed her own planet, Shendel asked in a voice full of horror. She made it worthless. To anyone who conquered it, Jake corrected. The hegemony won a dead world covered in poison and radiation. Commander Williams looked around the room at all the frightened alien faces. The hegemony spent more money conquering Tau Ceti than they could earn from it in 1,000 years. They lost money on every human world they attacked after that. Captain, Santos spoke up from the back of the room. My security reports show that General Stone's actions ended the war. The hegemony decided that fighting humans cost too much. But the human colonists all died, said Chief Thrak. Yes, Jake agreed. All 40,000 of them. But their deaths saved millions of other humans in other colonies. Engineer Lucy Hayes walked to the front with a data tablet in her hands. I have the technical specifications for current human defense systems. Every human world now has the same capabilities that General Stone used. She handed the tablet to Vexstar. His purple skin turned pale as he read the information. According to this, Vexstar said in a shaking voice, humans can destroy entire star systems if they are attacked. Not just destroy, Lucy corrected. It can make them permanently uninhabitable. No species would ever be able to use those resources. Dr. Rodriguez watched the aliens' faces and saw pure terror. They were finally understanding what humans were. Really like in war, Jake stepped forward again. I want to be very clear about something. Every human military commander has the authority to use these weapons. We do not need permission from our government. If any human world is threatened with destruction, the local commander can activate the Scorched Galaxy Protocol. That is insane, whispered Zekthey. No, Commander Williams said firmly. That is human. Jake looked around the room one final time. I've told you these stories for a reason. Every species in this galaxy needs to understand something important about humans. The room was so quiet that Dr. Rodriguez could hear her own heartbeat. Humans do not surrender, Jake said slowly. We do not accept slavery. We do not allow our children to be harmed. If you threaten us with destruction, we will take you with us. But that means everyone dies, said Shendel. Yes, Jake replied. Everyone dies, but only we choose to die free. General Vexstar stood up slowly. His hands were shaking as he set Lucy's tablet on the table. You are all completely insane. Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We prefer to think of ourselves as determined. Commander? Williams stepped beside Jake. The Galactic Council invited Earth to join this conference to learn about human military history. I hope you have learned what you came to learn. The aliens began to stand up and move toward the door. They walked carefully, as if they were afraid sudden movements might provoke the humans. As General Vexstar reached the door, he stopped and turned back. Commander Morrison, I would like to request a private meeting to discuss mutual non-aggression agreements between our species. Of course, General, Jake replied politely. I think that would be very wise. After all the aliens had left, Dr. Rodriguez remained in her chair. She looked at the 4 human officers standing at the front of the room. Was all of that true? She asked quietly. Commander Williams nodded. Every word. And the Scorched Galaxy Protocol really exists? Every human world has it, Captain Santos confirmed. It is our insurance policy.
Oh.
Dr. Rodriguez felt a strange mix of pride and fear. She had always known humans were tough, but she had never realized how far they would go to protect their freedom. Jake sat down in a chair for the first time in 4 days. He looked tired but satisfied. Do you think the other species will leave? Us alone now. Dr. Rodriguez asked. Jake smiled again, and this time it was genuine. Alina, I think they are going to be very careful about how they treat humans from now on. Outside the meeting room, aliens throughout the ship were sending urgent messages to their home worlds. The content was always the same. Do not fight the humans unless you want to die with them.